Just War is a Big Finish audio drama based on a Virgin New Adventure book of the same name, originally written by Lance Parker, adapted for audio by Jacqueline Rayner, and directed by Nicholas Briggs. The cover for this follows the others in the Time Ring trilogy, taking the titular Time Ring as a outline and putting the book that it's adapting inside of it, and that cover is exceptional here. It's just really good. Also, the colors across the entire CD work really well, and it makes an incredibly bold statement. It's just going, yep, that's what this story's about. Now, I will say, for some reason, the Big Finish website uses a slightly different cover for it. It's just weird. Wonder why they did that. And what they did was they covered up this swastika while leaving these two completely visible. So I'm not sure what the point was. But if you download it, I re-downloaded the CD to check, it is the correct cover, this one, which is the better cover. So, yeah, I don't know what that was about. Now, when I do these reviews, I like to kind of tell the story of the adaptation a little bit, and this one has a story. Basically, to summarize what this book took a long time to say, the original author, Lance Parkin, bought the rights to his own books after they went out of print. But because rights issues are much more complicated than I genuinely in real life want to get into, I'm just going to rely on the book when it says that this made getting the license for doing this book much more complicated. The way Parker ended up forcing them into adapting this basically opened the door for Big Finish to where individual authors could make individual contracts for their own individual books, rather than one contract with Virgin Publishing. And I do understand Big Finish's reluctance to open that door. We'll get more into that in a minute, but I'll just say this book does pretty explicitly say they almost didn't do this adaptation. To quote Berncie Summerfield, the inside story on this, it said that Gary Russell and Jason Hay-Gallery were now concerned that dealing with individual authors made things more difficult for their purposes. And it was not that authors were difficult, but that negotiating a license for each and every adaptation was more time-consuming than they could afford. They would need to consider their options. And I believe that. It genuinely sounds like it was a solicitor expense problem, rather than a issue with working with writers. So I'm just going to take this as a statement of why the second season of Berncie Summerfield audios are not book adaptations and instead original stories created specifically for the audio range. I'll also say that this is why there is such a gap between Birthright and Just War. Birthright came out in February of 1999, and Just War came out in August. And considering the others were much closer in release schedule, it's just fascinating to me that there was such a gap. It truly does feel like the negotiations just took forever on this. Like, the book here, it genuinely goes on for a full page showing emails about the subject. I don't want to get into it anymore. So, the last note I'll say on adapting this is that because this was adapted from a Virgin book where the Doctor could be featured, he was. So, they had to remove him for this adaptation. And like I said, unlike Birthright, where he wasn't in the book, they actually had to do the work to remove him here. The story starts with Jason 5 years before the main plot. We start with Jason being an awesome character where he's having drinks with a guy, and upon realizing, oh, that guy is an actual Nazi, he feels the need to barf and tells the guy, no, we're not friends, and then he leaves. I kind of would have liked for him to punch the guy, but, leaving the situation's the next best thing. Wish this was more normal. After the theme song, we then jump to the actual start of the plot, where it's 5 years later, and Bernice has been in Nazi Germany for only 3 months. And she's living with a woman named Ma Doris, who is played by future Sixth Doctor companion Maggie Stables. This was originally supposed to be played by Wendy Padbury, At least Gary Russell hoped she would play that part, but she ended up not being available. And honestly, I'm glad it worked out this way. The other stories from the season work really well with a Doctor Who guest star, but this one is just a bit too serious and too real to work with a featured special guest star. So I feel like that would have detracted from the story. It's only retroactively that Maggie Stables being in this stands out. We also learn that Bernice is living as Ma's daughter, who her actual daughter had died, and Bernice is taking a job just hoping to find Jason so they can get out of Nazi Germany. Something I really like about this, and we don't actually get the full reasons and wherefores of this scenario fully described to us until towards the end of part 2. The story trusts the listener to guess these things. And the reason why Ma helps it that we learn at the end is she's a cousin of John Lafayette from the beginning of the trilogy. She is someone whom he trusted and had informed about Bernice. Also, she just missed her daughter, and it was nice to have someone pretending to live as her. It helped. I really do appreciate this bit of the structure of the story, because there was no reason for Bernice to be talking about this out loud until she meets with Jason and explains how she survived. The story is much more focused on Bernice dealing with Nazis, so it makes complete sense and works really well. Now, I'll also say that yes, this whole reason for the connection is an invention that exists purely for the audio drama, because the book featured the Doctor, and while I'm sure Ma Doris is a character who existed in the book, I haven't read it, I don't have it, but I do believe she was there, but the explanation was obviously different, since the time rings were just a thing that the adaptations used to convolute time travel. Now, back to Jason. He has worked his way through the Allies and has made himself a minor leader within the group, and he is trying to use his position to find Bernice. Now, I was pretty sure of this. I only had to confirm my suspicions when I read the inside story that Bernice's story was relatively unchanged from the book, but Jason basically just got the Doctor's plot, which is actually a really good way to do things. It does have the side effect of Jason becoming more competent than he was in other stories, but that's a good thing for him. I like Jason. Now, just to overly summarize things, Bernice and Jason's plots are really dramatic and emotionally numbing at times. So instead, I'm just going to talk about the two other characters featured in this story. The two main Nazi characters, Steinman and Wolf. Wolf is played by Mark Gatiss, and for the most part he is, for lack of a better term, a classic Nazi. Some examples of this are in part 1 when he's trying to flex his knowledge to his subordinate, asking, "What's the simplest form of torture?" And when she suggests Chinese water torture, he dismisses it because the Chinese are as low as dogs. And when Steinman is accurately psychoanalyzing him and his personality flaws, Wolf dismisses the entire psychoanalyzing process as Jewish science, therefore not worth talking about. Oh, also, he gleefully tortures Bernice after capturing her. Also, after Bernice has to kill a Nazi to keep her cover, Wolf kills 6 people in retaliation. I can't remember if they were Jews or not, but probably. On to Steinman. He comes across as a reasonable person, both in comparison to Wolf and in comparison to modern Nazis. Steinman seemingly is someone who has bought wholly into the Nazi propaganda, telling Jason after he captures him, yes, everyone gets captured in this. Anyway, Steinman tells him, "We're not as bad as you British people. We do kindness. We've banned bad things that the British people do. Therefore, we're better." Also, and I just can't help but feel like it's just a regurgitation of the propaganda he gets. But the thing is, he truly acts and thinks like he's a good guy. And there's this fascinating bit where he's trying to make even the bad things that Jason knows about and tells him about, like, for instance, I don't know, the concentration camps, sound okay by saying, yes, we're not perfect. The world is not perfect, yet. But we were punished unfairly earlier in the war. Also, when Steinman is interrogating Bernice, he truly believes that if Bernice comes from the future, which she has told them, yes, she's from the future. Anyway, he believes that she must be a Nazi, because according to him, Nazis are definitionally superior, and other people are tainted, and just not focused. And of course the Nazis will win. And he says this with the logic of inevitability. Steinman is my favorite character in the entire story, and it's because I think he points at a truth we don't want to talk about when we talk about the Nazis. When we talk about them, they aren't typically described in human terms, which is somewhat understandable. It's cathartic in a way, differing ourselves from who the Nazis were. But it also leaves room for us to not see the possibility that people we know, or even ourselves, could become like that, as we've seen in America? Yes, people can. Now, there is more to this story, including a genuine sci-fi element, including a radar invisible plane that Bernice and Jason have to stop, yes, but honestly, it's the least important and least interesting thing about the story. I'd rather talk about this story for what it's saying about the Nazis and the way it portrays them. So I will. I think this story works exceptionally well for the way it chooses to portray Nazis, because so much of our culture has eroded the venom of the Nazis by making them even more venomous. They don't feel like real people. The story through Steinman shows them as human beings, flawed people, evil people, making decisions for themselves. And I think it's important to portray Nazis this way, because if we portrayed them as human beings, we could see ourselves in them and be repulsed by it and tell ourselves we would never be like this. Even in Doctor Who, they tried to do stuff with the Nazis, mainly with the Daleks, and in lots of ways, it gets their ideology correct, and especially in terms of the hate. If you look back at the first ever Dalek story, Ian puts it best. He says, it's a dislike for the unlike. But even within the time of Terry Nation, who created them, by the time he got to the third Doctor stories, he'd lost the message through the imagery he created, and the point became diluted. So, yes, there are great stories that portray the evil of the Nazis, but we still fell as a nation into Nazism. We're headed that way. We have a president who has people rounding up people based mainly on the color of their skin and just trying to get a quota. It's awful. There's so much that is wrong with all of this, and I wish we weren't there, and I wish anyone saying anything like me just on a video, just making something talking about, oh hey, this had a really good portrayal of the Nazis, and if we'd just showed them like this more, things could be better. Yeah, well, it's too late. They're here. They're doing their evil. I don't know. I don't even think there's a point to me saying this. It's just, it's where we are, and I started thinking about this over a year ago when I was thinking about being a YouTuber and then making it, and here we are. And even now, the whole point of, hey, it would be bad just having this be over-the-top evil, but here we are. So anyway, yeah, this whole thing sort of went off the path of just being about a Berncie Summerfield story, but getting back to it, this is just a really good introduction to talking about this stuff. It's also a great story. I like it a lot, but it's genuinely a difficult listen. especially nowadays. Like, it took me longer than I want to admit to fully listen to this just because it was so brutal. The story does a lot to make you feel like you're in that world by making this world really small and just focusing on the plights of a few characters who are having to make their way in this world and see the decisions that they have to make in order to survive it. Yeah, it's really good. It's also really brutal.